and take a 1 minute lead. All right, and we're live. Sorry about that, folks, about getting in just a little bit late. We were having some technical difficulties, and by we, I mean me. So Lynn and Rosetta were perfectly fine as usual. It was me. Give us just 1 minute, and we're going to go ahead and start this session. All right, team, you guys ready?
We're ready.
Let me just make sure. I think when I went out the last time, there we go. Foundation 5. Closing the deal. Got it.
We are good.
All right, here we go. Let's begin. In three, two, one. All right, everybody. Welcome to this episode, this final episode of the From Anxiety to Offer series that we started back at the end of January, where we're looking to give the opportunity to Gen Z and young professionals, and quite frankly, anybody who needs it, the help in overcoming some of the obstacles, a lot of times unknown obstacles that exist within the interview process. We started this by looking at Foundation One, from anxiety to confidence, and
Mm-hmm.
discussed why we're anxious. Then we looked at Foundation Two, which we call the reality check, which is really identifying and evaluating what interviewers are looking at and evaluating when they're looking at you in the interview and talking to you. Then we looked at Foundation Three, which was the translation gap. We recognized that the interviewer, and here's one thing, and you're saying a different thing,
Mm-hmm.
and we need a translator in the middle, and you are the translator. And so we talked about the PAR concept, which we'll talk about again today, of how to communicate during an interview to put your best foot forward. And then finally, in our last session, we talked about reading the room, one of the most important skills, not only for the interview, but for your life, not just even work, even in your personal life. The ability to read the room could absolutely make all the difference in so many situations and circumstances that you find yourself in. And that leads us to today, where we're talking about closing the deal. So our focus today is going to be, we're going to look at a little bit of before, we're going to look at it during the interview, after the interview, where we're going to focus a lot of attention, and then what happens beyond the interview. We're going to take an opportunity to look at all of those areas today and retouch some ground that we've already covered, and then add some new ground on top of that to make sure that you have the complete playbook that you need to win in your interviews. Let's see. One other thought about this, and it's a thought that we've carried throughout, and it's to remember that this isn't about perfection, it's about reliability. Remember, when we talked about what the interviewers are looking for, they were looking for trust, whether you'd represent the company well, and what kind of management load would you be for the organization. A lot of that really boils down to the reliability factor. And so many times we focus on trying to be perfect in the interview that we miss communicating the reliability factor
Mm-hmm.
and demonstrating that we're a trustworthy hire that will benefit you and benefit the organization for years to come. So, with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and jump into the first segment today, and that is the before, which is your strategic preparation. Now, when we talk about strategic preparation, I want you to think back to when we were in the first session, both the anxiety session and a little bit of the interview session. Here's the truth about preparation: preparation is respect. And when you prepare, you show respect for not only the interviewer, but their time, their position or their role in the organization. In other words, that person had to be important enough for the organization, whether they're that area boss, a hiring manager, the HR lead, or an HR director. They had to take time out, and their role positioned them in a place where they are one of the groups of people or one of the individuals that's best suited to determine if you're a good fit for that organization. So when you prepare, it shows respect for their role. It shows respect for the opportunity that this presents and that you've been given. And it shows respect for yourself because you're not coming to the table empty handed. You've spent some time, you've evaluated this organization, and in your evaluation, you've determined that this is something you want to continue with and find out more about it. So it's an opportunity to demonstrate respect all around. But here's the important part: preparation doesn't mean that you have to spend 10 hours researching everything. It means that you're being strategic about what you're actually researching. So you'll gather the information you need, not just everything out there. Let's take a look at a little bit of a checklist that will help you in your research ahead. First, we remind you that we want to research with purpose. When we talked about from anxiety to offer, we talked about researching like a person and not a robot. See, a robot will just simply look at part A and part B and look at a quick mission statement and the about the company, and they'll consider that research. Well, when you're serious about the job, you're going beyond that. You might look at those things as a starting place, but the
Right.
opportunity to look deeper, you want to look in the company's missions and value, mission and value. You want to look at recent news or projects that the company is involved in. You want to look at who you're meeting, which means you go and jump on LinkedIn and see if you can find that individual and get a sense for their background and what they're about. And then you want to look back at that job description and look at 3 to 5 role requirements that stand out. In other words, you look at that job interview, and there might be some things that are repetitive in that job interview that might clue you in. This is an important skill or this is an important task they're going to need to have covered. So you want to identify those things. Then you want to take it to step two, which is you want to prepare your stories. This is where the PAR principle comes into play. Remember, we want to pick 3 to 5 experiences using PAR. And remember, PAR represents the problem, which is the challenge you face, the action, what you did, and R, the result, which is the outcome. When we communicate in that simple framework and keep it directly to the question that's being asked, we really can win every time with those questions and those answers. Then you want to plan your questions. You want to make sure that you've prepared 3 to 5 questions of your own that you use to ask questions for you. Things like, what does success look like for me here? What do you enjoy here? And tell me about the team culture or some current challenges the team is facing that I might be able to come in and help with. Finally, you want to look at the
Hey,
logistic and
David,
detail. Yeah, Lynn, go ahead.
I just want to jump in there because you've talked about researching with purpose, planning your questions. There's a great tool out there that everyone can use. It's the annual report. You can find it online. You can look and
Mm,
get the answers to many of the questions you've got here. This is a great place to plan your questions. Also, you learn a lot about what a company wants to do from that job posting. But there's the reality that the job description in a job posting and the actual job description within the company is a little different in that the job description within the company contains metrics. So between the job description and the annual report, you can get some great questions there, like delve into what are the metrics for this particular, whatever it was in that job description that it said was a requirement. So I'm
That's
just throwing out there that you can find so much information just in the annual report and that job description.
that's so true, Lynn. That's actually a wealth of information, and a lot of companies put that out annually. So
Mhm.
you'll get a good picture of what their year looked like, and then you'll also see, in that annual report, you'll find out things about volunteer work that
Mhm.
happened in the community, things that the company invested its time,
Mhm.
resources, and effort into, and those are all things that'll tell you something about the job, and also give you a sense of who you're going to be working for.
And with
I
that,
want
who
to.
you're going to be working with is you'll have find your board members, which will help you understand their values for the kind of people they put on their board.
That's very correct. Very correct. I want to jump back also to the par section and just remind you that if you didn't attend uh, session one where we began to introduce par, but even more importantly, session three when we talked about the translation gap, I really want to suggest that you go back and look at that because remember that when you create your stories should show different skill sets. For example, you should have a story that communicates your teamwork, problem solving, leadership, adaptability, a time that you took initiative. And those will all tend to match with some of the questions that are typically asked in most interviews. The last thing that you want to do before your interview is you want to look at logistics and details, and that is things like confirm your time and location, whether that may be on Zoom. If it's virtual, is it Zoom? Is it Microsoft Teams? Is it an internal company tool that's going to be used, or is it something else? If it's in person, you want to make sure you have the right address and you know who to ask for when you arrive, and then again confirming the time, and then make sure even when you confirm the time, that doesn't mean if your interview's at 11, you show up at 11. If your interview's at 11, you should be expecting to show up somewhere around 10:45. It's never wrong to be a little early. It's always wrong to be a little late. So you want to make sure you have that right. Then, of course, if you're having a virtual interview, you want to test your technology, which David did not do today, and that's why he got in just a little bit of trouble at the last minute. And then, of course, you want to do the fun stuff. Plan your outfit. Plan any materials that you have. I know some of you it may be tedious, but to me, it's fun to put together an outfit. What do I want to communicate with what I'm wearing today? What do I want to say? So you want to take advantage of that and any materials that you need. You want to carry your resume with you. You want to make sure that if there are any other things that you've been asked for in the interview, you want to bring those with you. And one of the reasons you want to remember to bring your resume is because typically one of the questions that is asked in an interview is tell me about yourself. And again, they don't mean tell me about yourself from the perspective of back when I was six, I had a sense that I wanted to work for this organization. We want to hear a little bit about you as it relates to your skill sets and your work history. It should be a smaller reflection of your intro on your resume, your brief summary statement. Ladies, any other feedback on the before we get to the next session?
Well, that test tech, you use this system all the time, David. You know how this works, but you're not always guaranteed it will. So I'm
Correct.
just going to throw out there, if someone uses Zoom all the time, does not guarantee it's going to work the day of that interview that they have. Get on 15 minutes early, 30 minutes early, and ensure, because I think I get a false sense. I'm going to log in, I'm going to be right there. So I get a false sense, and I don't always go in when I ought to. And I've paid for that as well.
Yeah, and you all 90% of the time you walk up to your computer and everything works exactly like it's supposed to. But that
Mhm.
other 10 happens when you have something important about to happen. So some people call it Murphy's law. But either way, just be prepared and take the opportunity to check on that before you begin. Now, remember, what is the purpose of all of this preparation? And remember, the preparation helps to alleviate the anxiety that comes with interviews. You may
Mm.
still feel a little anxious, have the butterflies about actually having the conversation, but it won't be because you're ill prepared. And that's what you want to do. You want to be able to strip away anything that gets in the way of you being as solid and ready and not bothered during the interview process. Okay, let's look at the next part. Um, the other thing we want to talk about is just briefly touch on the issue of pay during the interview. Um, and actually, we'll come back to this because it's about when to ask about pay. So we'll come back to this in just a little bit. Remember this. Remember, uncertainty creates anxiety. Preparation removes uncertainty. So prepare. That's the key. Prepare, prepare, prepare. Now let's talk about the next section of this, and that's what to do or reminders of what to do during the interview. This is the playbook in action. Now, of course, we want to start with a great impression of a great first impression. We want to start strong. So what do we want to do? We first of all we want to greet with confidence. Again, it doesn't matter whether you're in person or whether you're virtual. You want to make sure that you have eye contact, that you smile, and that if you're in person, you give a firm handshake. And I just want to say something else because I keep seeing this statistic come back in front of me, and it is this concept called the Gen Z stare, and it's just this kind of blank look. It's as if you know what it is, and I know where it comes from, and it goes back to that great book we've talked about during this session before, The Anxious Generation, and it's the same way you stare at a phone or iPad screen.
Mm.
It's just a blank stare, and that's not that works for the iPad, but that's not human. There's human eye contact that matters. And you need to work to make sure that you make good eye contact from beginning to the middle to the end of your interview. I'm telling you, it's one of the things that the interviewers are saying goes wrong in the interview. They talk about how this generation and young professionals do not make eye contact, or you get the Gen Z stare, which means they don't know whether you understood what was just said or not. So you want to get that right. You also want to make sure that you're using the 10-second scan, which we talked about last week in reading the room. From the moment you hit the door, you want to just pause for a moment. You want to look around the room. You want to see what the mood is, what the body language is, what the verbal cues that are going on in the room that will tell you not only how to enter, but how to handle things as the interview goes on. That was in session 4, or foundation 4, reading the room. And then finally, as you're starting to wrap up the interview and during times throughout, you want to always express gratitude. Not only are you thanking them for their time, but anytime you receive a compliment, it's appropriate to thank them for that compliment or whatever it may be. Hey, you look really nice today. Thanks for taking the time to dress up for this interview. You're welcome. It's my pleasure to do so. You want to always demonstrate gratitude. And the reason being is that this sets for lack of a well, not lack of a better word, it kind of sets the tone for your professional, engaged, respectful interview. And that's what you always want to have. And now, the other thing to remember is this is the complete opposite of some of what so many are doing and seeing. This isn't the interview where you're wearing your Crocs. You might be wearing them if you're virtual, but you're not in person. This isn't slouching. This isn't all of that body language that says this is casual, this is not jargon, this isn't casual conversation. It is professional, engaged, and respectful. Ladies, do you have anything that you want to add to that before we move forward?
I do. I'd like to add as well. Um, when we say make eye contact, we aren't meaning to, and you may have said this, David, but I just want to reiterate it. We don't mean to stare someone in their eyes. That can also become uncomfortable and it can show a bit of kind of disrespect. You just want to make that initial eye contact, say what you're saying, and be yourself, polite, and so forth, but not be overbearing with the staring directly in someone's eyes.
Yeah, so they said make eye contact.
Yeah,
Right,
blink, blink.
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
And
Yes,
what we're talking about is, again, I say this and I don't say it disrespectfully, because I respect this generation and I respect young professionals, and I
Mhm.
recognize that what's missing is that they haven't been taught any different. But when you grew up with your phone and your screen, you're just staring at it. And if you don't
Mhm.
have enough practice with interactions, people interactions, you lose some of the habits that really communicate strong communication skills. And one of those is that eye contact. So it doesn't have to be overbearing, like Rosetta said. It shouldn't be non existent. You want to be in that place where you're making good eye contact. You might be thinking and look away for a moment. You come back, but you want to keep it natural and easy. So
right.
now let's look at the second part of the during process, and that is, now that you've got your opening set, you now want to be able to talk about answering questions. And again, this is where PAR comes into play. You want to structure your answers by using PAR, being concise, and reading the room. Remember, PAR goes throughout the interview with you. As questions are being asked, you're answering them, thinking about the problem, action, result profile. Now, some questions don't require that. If you're asked, looking at the schedule, would you be available for so and so days and these hours? You're not trying to par that kind of question. You're working to par any question that goes to communicating about your skills, your abilities, and situational items that demonstrate how you would handle them. You would handle other questions quite naturally. When we talk about B for being concise, each one of those par built answers shouldn't be more than a minute or 2 minutes. If you find yourself 5 minutes down the road, you're probably rambling and way too deep into the story to give them an overview. Now, someone might ask you after you give them the initial par answer, they may say, "Hey, that sounds interesting. Could you expound on that a little bit more?" And then you have now the permission to give them more information, more feedback, more guidance on how you handled that situation. But you don't want to presume that up front. You want to be concise and very clear in your answer. And remember, you're also looking for their behavior while you're giving answers. Are they leaning in? That communicates you can elaborate. Are
Mhm.
they checking their notes, checking their phone? Maybe you need to stick just right with the pace that the interviewer has and keep moving on. These are all things that are happening during the interview. And let me also just encourage you in this. This is something that you'll get better with over time. Now, I know you may be thinking, I hope I don't get to practice that much. Because you're looking for a job and you hope you get it. Well, that's why we tell you practice, practice, practice before it happens. And then when you get into it, you'll see these things just kind of happen naturally for you. You might realize you miss a piece or here or there, but you're still flowing and you're still seeing most of this come into play. And if you find yourself going through multiple interviews, even if you're just going through multiple interviews within the same organization, because remember, organizations can have multiple levels of interviews. Sometimes you can go into a place like maybe a Best Buy or a local company, and you have one interview and they make a decision. But others might have you come in and first interview with somebody who determines whether you're qualified or not and how they feel about you. And from there, that might escalate to a panel interview with your manager and two other people. And then that might escalate to a third interview with the final hiring manager or whatever it may be. Excuse me. But interviews can happen even in the same company multiple times. Don't be put off by that. That's a good thing. The more interviews you go through, the closer you're getting to the job.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the next piece of the puzzle that we want to look at is we want to look at some of the common interview questions you're going to be asked. Things like, tell me about yourself. This is a brief career story and why this role might be a good fit for you. Tell us about your greatest strength. Give us one relevant to a job that you had as an example. Your greatest weakness. This is one that people don't like to ask. And we talked about this before. People don't like to talk about where they either missed it or they're not strong. But you want to give them a real weakness and what you're doing to improve it. So, you wouldn't come into the interview and say, well, I'm just flat out lazy and I hope to fix it someday in the future. That's impossible. That's not a good look for your interview. But what you do want to say is, well, I've had trouble in the past with this type of situation. And so to help me to get better at that, I've started using a task list that's helped me to prioritize what's most important and then tackling that list from top to bottom. And now I find that I'm getting more things done day by day. So you want to make sure that you position that well. Why do you want to work here? You want to take the opportunity to connect your values to the company's mission. And remember, you know the company's mission because you looked it up and you have that information in your personal computer, which is your mind. And then tell me about a time where you failed or you experienced a failure. Again, using the PAR framework of the problem, the action, and the result, and what you learned. Lynn, any thoughts here?
I'm looking at that, and sometimes we talk about how we don't want to talk about our failure or weaknesses. Often we are at a loss to come up with our greatest strength as well. So
Yes.
preparation for all three of those are important.
Now, let's look at what to do when you don't know how to answer the question. Remember these things. We talked about these in the translation gap. Don't panic. Take a breath because it's okay to not know everything. Be honest about it. Say, that's a great question, for example. I don't have direct experience with that, but here's how I'd approach it. Or I never really had a situation like that, but if I did, here's what I would do. And then show your thinking. Walk them through your problem solving process. Because again, we looked at the interviewers and what they're looking for. And one of the things they're looking for is your ability to problem solve. So anytime you think about show your thinking, like showing your work in math. Do you remember that in school where the teachers would not just give you the math problem and say, give me the answer, but they would say, show your work. And so when you were doing that division problem, you had to do all of the work underneath to show how you got to the answer at the top. I used to hate that, but I now see the value in it because it helped me to understand I know how to get from point A to point B because I showed my work so many times. And then remember, ahead of it all, keep your composure. And remember, your composure matters more than perfection. Let me say that again. Composure over perfection. Nobody expects you to be perfect, but if you lose it in the interview because you're not sure how to answer a question, that can communicate something to the interviewer. So you want to stay calm, cool, and collected and keep moving on. And then, of course, during the middle of the interview, You want to take the opportunity to ask your questions. The interviewer would typically ask a question. Do you have any questions for us? You want to always say yes. There may be an opportunity even throughout other portions of the interview where they open it up. They may talk about a certain task of the job and say, do you have any thoughts about that, or do you have any questions about that? If you do, feel free to ask those questions. But remember, asking a question shows, number one, that you've been listening. It demonstrates that you're genuinely interested, and it helps you to evaluate if this company is the right fit for you. Never forget, you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. And if they feel great about you, but by the time the interview is over, you don't feel great about them and you're not interested in the job, you have a right to a need to communicate that. But the only way you'll know that is if you begin to ask the questions during the interview process and get the kind of answers that help you to evaluate where things are. And then, of course, you want to make sure that means having 2 or 3 prepared questions. You want to listen to their answers. Sometimes their answers may trigger a secondary question, but just remember, this is still part of reading the room. So if it seems like they're running out of time, or some things are, or they're leaning in and they're very comfortable, then adjust your timing and your pace in the interview process. Any thoughts on that section before we move to the close? All right, then let's close the interview. In the last 2 minutes, you want to end strong, right? You want to finish as strong as you started. Number 1, express interest. This role sounds like a great fit for me. Ask about the next steps. So what are the next steps? If I'm hired, what would be the next steps? Or now that we've completed the interview, what are the next steps that you'll be walking through? You want to again show that gratitude and thank them for the time and the opportunity to come in. And then, of course, you want to close with that same firm handshake, making eye contact, smiling. And then, of course, you won't make the firm handshake if you're virtual, but you'll still be making great eye contact, thanking them, and then, of course, making sure that you smile so it doesn't look like you just had a tooth extraction during the interview.
Mm-hmm.
And just remember, your clothes matters. Your clothes actually matters a lot because we want to make a good first impression, and then we want to leave a final impression that says, "This is my guy. This is my girl. We're going to take this and run with them." Okay.
Absolutely.
So now let's get to the big part that we've been pushing towards, and that's the after the interview. This is where follow-up and professionalism all come into play and create an experience that's beneficial both for them and for you. So first of all, let's look at what the interview doesn't do when you're finished. The interview doesn't end when you walk out of the door. What you do after the interview matters, and it matters greatly because once that interview is over, we talked about a couple of weeks ago in one of these sessions, we talked about the concept of being ghosted, and we're going to talk about that some more in just a second. But do you know, for you to leave your interview and not have any further communication with that interviewer is an equivalent of you ghosting them just as much as they have the ability to potentially ghost you. So make sure you're not doing that, and make sure that you take the next steps that we're going to suggest, starting with send them a thank you email. Within 24 hours of your interview, you should have a note in their inbox that thanks them for their time, that references something specific from the conversation you had. I'm really excited about the job, and I'm really excited about some of the volunteer things that your company does in the community. that's really exciting to me and makes this job even more appealing to me. You also want to reiterate your interest in the role, which I just kind of did with that previous statement, but it's okay to say that I'm actually interested in this position. Here's an example of what you could share. Thank you for taking time to speak with me about this role. I enjoyed. Now put the specific when it says role, put your specific the job that you interviewed for. I enjoyed learning about, and I'm excited about the opportunity to contribute to, you know, Acme and Co.'s company goals. Please let me know if you need anything else. I look forward to next steps. That's such a positive way to do it. And even that next step of saying, I look forward to next steps, you're communicating in a positive way that says, I'm already acting as if I have this.
And
And
can I
so
throw
I'm,
another thought out in there
yeah,
too?
go ahead, Lynn.
It is important within 24 hours to send that email. But if you want to take it up a notch, if this is a job you're really interested in and you know there's a lot of competition, set yourself apart by sending a handwritten note and do it pretty much the same time you do that. It seems archaic, but people who take that extra time to drop off a note, mail a note into them, sets themselves apart and shows, wow, they go over and above. I bet they will do that when they work for me as well.
Yeah. And I'll add a little piece to that. If they are local to where you live, I suggest that you drop it off so it gets there as quickly as possible. If they're not local to where you live, drop that in the mail literally the same day. You want to get that out the same day that you interview because you want it to get to them as quickly as possible. And just remember, it's okay to do both.
It is.
I
It
I
is.
I almost want to suggest that if you're not local to that company, like you were saying, go to your friendly, Starbucks or coffee shop, sit down, write that note out, and just get it right back over there to them.
Mhm.
That way, you've gotten your thoughts right there. You've gotten everything written down. You're able to drop that note off immediately. Um,
Mhm.
And look,
And
it's not a
I
bad
know
thing. I literally have a right behind me here. You can't see it, but I've got a box of thank you notes that I keep on hand. And the reason why I do that is whether it's a client I'm working with or somebody that I've met that's gone an extra step for me, or whether it's a holiday of some sort, I'm always ready to drop a thank you note in the mail to somebody and have that experience. Go ahead,
you
Lynn.
what I was going to say is I had a friend who talked about a job she wanted so badly. She went down the street and bought half a dozen of whatever cookies that this company
Yep.
was well known for and went back and dropped it off with the receptionist and talked a few moments about how much they enjoyed being there in the interview, the culture of the office. It was very nice to the receptionist and gave them the cookies. Please understand when we talk about respect earlier, we're talking about respect everybody in the office that you come in contact with. They say secretaries rule the world. Receptionists and secretaries are often gatekeepers to say this is how they behaved in the waiting room. This is so she dropped those cookies off, had a short conversation, and just left. Sent her thank you notes. She got the job.
Right. And you guys, the reason why we're seems like we may be talking about this a lot is because a lot of times it's the littlest, simplest things
Mhm.
that give you the head, give you the preeminence over somebody else who interviewed. You two, remember, we talked in a previous session that everybody's qualified. The question is how they feel about you. And when two of you apply for the same job, one of you just goes through the interview and never communicates back again. And the other of you takes the time to do a handwritten note or drop something off to that nature. If all things are equal, which one might you hire? And that's the thinking. Go above the normal and position yourself to be seen more, because so much of the interview process is about being seen after you've been heard.
I'd just like to add really quickly, because I know you have to move on. Not only does it allow you to be seen, it also communicates you want to fit in, or you are a good fit into their culture. It talks about what you can bring to enhance just who they are in the workspace on a daily basis.
Right, right. Again, we can't we can't emphasize that enough. But now, in the same token, I want you to know it's also important to send a note if it's not the right fit for you. After you go through the interview, and if you determine, I don't think I want this job, or I don't think it's a fit for me, still send the thank you email, still send the thank you note. Well, you might ask why. Well, it's because professionalism matters. You never know who knows who. You never know when you might run into, especially if you're working within your local community and you might work different jobs in the same community. Not only do you never know who knows who, but you never know what the connections and bridges are between organizations that could help you to get a head up, or a hand up in another location you may be interviewing. You want to build your reputation in every interaction. Lynn and I were talking about this yesterday. It's called your personal brand. And thank you notes and positive communications help to communicate something about who you are. What is David McIntyre's brand? What is Lynn Nestor's brand? What is Rosetta McDowell's brand? What's your brand? Those are all important questions that people ask when they're connecting with you. And by sending that note, you're doing some personal branding that is positive. You also may cross paths with that person again in your career. And when you do, it may present an opportunity. I've been to, for example, I've been to events in Orlando or at the local convention center where I ran into somebody that I had worked with years ago down the road. And now they're an HR person, or now they're doing this role. And all of that is an opportunity to open a door for you. Or let's say you start working for a company and that leads you off to start your own business. Well, you still have good communication and connections with people you worked with, people that you did this with or that with while you worked. And those very people can become your future clients, or people who will love to tell other people about you and what you're doing now. You never want to miss the opportunity to have positive business connections and build a strong network. It lasts you a lifetime. Lynn, were you about to say something?
No, I was just agreeing with all that you were saying.
Yeah, and just remember, if they give you an offer and you want to decline, again, be gracious about it, be brief, and don't overshare. You know, don't come out and say, well, the reason why I didn't want to work with your organization was you guys don't do anything. And it seems like it's boring there. And you guys don't have a place to take a nap in the middle of the day like Google does. Don't overshare. None of that's necessary. Just say, after consideration, I decided that it wasn't going to be a good fit for me. And I don't think I would be a great fit for you. And unless there's a real big press about the why, I wouldn't add any more to that. And if there is a bigger press about the why, you could use maybe one or two quick examples of, well, for example, the schedule that you presented was something that I wouldn't be able to do half of what you were looking for. So I knew then it wasn't a good fit. Very practical reasons. Never make it personal, in the sense that there's some offense or anything like that. Because remember, even with a no, you're still wanting to have good relationships. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Now let's look at this next section. Uh, s- Number one, we want to send the note. The second thing we want to do, or I, I don't want to say the second thing, we want to make sure that we remain gracious to the end. Even when you're rejected for the job,
Mhm.
Okay.
you want to still be gracious. You want to thank them for the opportunity again for the interview. Um, I don't think it's inappropriate to ask if there was anything they would recommend that you did differently in future interviews that would be helpful because they might give you some good feedback. A lot of times they may simply say no, it just wasn't the right fit, or it came down to two candidates and we opted for John instead of Jill. It really does boil down to those simple things. And one of the things I want to tell you is never take a rejection personally.
Mhm.
Never take a job rejection personally. I had to learn that because there are a couple of jobs that I just really wanted. And it turns out it didn't play well for me at all. And I
Now,
felt bad about it.
I would like to jump in on this one, be gracious to the end, because sometimes it is in your best interest not to get the job. This interviewer may know another position that you're a better fit with. And when you're gracious, they are more apt to refer you to someone else. We've talked about being gracious, setting your personal brand, and I can only speak from my experience for this whole process to this point. I started working at a local utility. It took 3 interviews to become a customer service representative. Throughout my career there, I applied for one job I did not get. However, I worked hard, I was gracious. Don't burn bridges, work with everybody you come in contact with or find a way to work with them. I was every 2 years while I was there, I was given the opportunity to move somewhere else. I worked on a project for updating all of the software for the company. I became the first webmaster for the company. I was the archivist. I went over and did other jobs. I ultimately ended up being the manager of training and quality assurance for a company. It was because people knew me and would say, Lynn, are you interested in this position? When you are rejected for a role, like I was rejected for that one, it kept me on a path to really fall into places I would have enjoyed much more. So don't be offended and go through the process. Be gracious. Don't burn bridges. People laugh. We'll go out to eat with friends and I'll see somebody I know in the comment and they are joking and making fun of me, but it's like, Lynn knows somebody everywhere she goes. And if you don't burn bridges, you do have those relationships that people will stand by you and help you. So it pays off even in the small areas to be kind.
It really, really does.
Yes.
Uh, Remember, professionalism and rejection shows maturity,
Mhm,
and it also keeps doors open. And that's what you
mhm,
always want to do. You always want to have an open door that's available when you need it.
mhm.
All right, let's talk about self assessment. Rosetta, you want to take us from here?
Sure. Wanted to start by just reminding you that every interview is an opportunity for growth. Each time you have an opportunity to go sit before someone, tell them a little bit about yourself, and learn something about them and their company, it's an opportunity to learn something. I like to talk to you about a few ways to assess, to do a self assessment without spiraling into self criticism when something doesn't go exactly like you imagined it going. Whether you get the job or not, this is an opportunity to improve, right? So, post interview debrief. David, I want to just confirm as well. There's a tool that we have in the playbook that also will refer to a debrief, like a form.
Yeah, we'll give you a debrief that you can use.
Thank you. So, three questions that you want to ask. What went well? Like, which questions did you answer confidently? What moments felt strong to you? What moments did you feel like, I know I nailed that one, right? Another question could be, what did you connect on? Um, there may be a time, a point in the interview where you and the interviewer just seem to really understand one another. Those things you want to take note of. The next question, what could you improve on? Which questions threw you off? I wasn't ready for that one, right? So maybe next time you'll practice how to be ready for that question. Where did you ramble or lose focus? So once you kind of evaluate that, you can also prepare for a more straight lined response. Number three, what did you learn? Is this job still a good fit for us? Just like we were just talking about how to respond when the job is not a good fit for us. Well, you will learn that as you do your post interview evaluation. What surprised you? Um, it's like, where did they come from? Where that question, you know? So there will be opportunities to reevaluate that as well. And you'll also be able to determine what questions do you still have. So we want to kind of reframe and rethink what it means to bomb. You know, what bombed? Don't spiral. Reframe it constructively. Remember, this is an opportunity for you to learn. So catastrophizing sounds like this. I completely bombed that question. They probably think I'm incompetent. I'll never get hired. Well, catastrophizing also sounds like a bunch of negativity, right? We don't need that. But let's be constructive. Let's build ourselves up with this. Now, take this opportunity and say, that question caught me off guard. Next time, I'll prepare a par story about that topic. I know what to work on, right?
Mhm.
Notice the difference here. The catastrophizing kind of takes you down a rabbit hole of negativity. It doesn't help, not helpful. Constructiveness, though, when you're constructive and you talk about, okay, I messed that one up, but you know what? I'm going to do better next time. It gets you prepared to go forward in a positive light.
And it's also important to note, even when you bombing a question doesn't mean you're not going to get hired.
Mm.
You can bomb a question, know you need to do that better, and still find that you got the job. Just don't assume because you bombed a question doesn't mean, well, I can bomb a question anytime, anywhere. That's
Right,
not always going to be the case either.
No.
So,
right,
just be mindful. But most important part is, even when you've spent, I know there are people out there right now who will tell you that they've spent the last year or 2 years looking for a job, and interviews not going well. One of the things that you have to do in order to ensure interviews go better is you have to stay positive. And we
Right.
can't emphasize that enough. You have to stay positive with every interview, and you can't let one bad interview jade you from the rest of them. And that's something Gen Z and young professionals have to guard against. Just because somebody was shady in an interview or didn't handle it well or treated you a certain way doesn't mean you should be skeptical of everybody else. Everybody else is their own company, and they produce the outcomes for their organization that they need. Go ahead, Rosetta.
Is it, well, I just wanted to add as well. No, this we're talking about, this is all going on during the interview, right? If you're sitting there in the interview and you realize what you said or how you responded, you feel like you bombed. This is a in the moment recovery opportunity, right?
Mhm.
So You have to keep your composure, as we talked about before. And you're saying to yourself, even in that moment, okay, let's recover and take a breath and move forward, right? One rough answer cannot ruin your opportunity for this position. Just always remember that. You want to build your interview muscle, and every interview makes you better at interviewing. Remember this, it's a skill, not a talent. A skill takes practice, a skill has to be developed. And so you're fine. Just keep going. You're going to track your progress after 3 to 5 interviews. Always do your assessment, your debriefs. You'll see patterns of what you did well, and you'll be able to um, go ahead and practice those and get ready for the next opportunity. So this is progress. This is what this evaluation will help you do. The debrief helps you to, make progress, and you can celebrate that.
All right, so let's talk about navigating rejection and ghosting. That's it, it's part of the interview process. The ghosting part is not a good part of the hiring process, and as I've said previously, HR and hiring managers have to do better, but interviewers have to not be moved by that, right? So when it doesn't work out, rejection is redirection. Remember that. Not every opportunity is the right fit, and that's okay. There have been positions that I've applied for, and then once hearing some of the things that they want you to do, I was a whole lot less interested because some of the things they were talking about were not things that were on the job description, and I had to evaluate whether I thought that was a good fit for me. But just remember, some people would say rejection is just the way of redirecting you to the place you are supposed to be. Remember to stay professional. Remember to send a gracious response. Ask for feedback if it's appropriate. Keep the door open. You never know when another role might come up, or when you were initially told you weren't going to get a job, and then find a couple of weeks later, you get a call back asking you if you want that job because something didn't work out or something didn't happen the way that it was supposed to. And now what you thought you lost was actually yours. Remember to keep the door open. And that means not being offended, right? Well, they didn't accept me and take me to this job the first time. So I hate that company and I'm never working for them again. You're already in the wrong headspace. You're in the wrong headspace. Come back, touch grass. And then just take it easy and keep the door open to every opportunity. And then, as Rosetta just shared, learn from it. Use the self assessment that you have to improve for the next time. So, as we kind of close here, we want to look at getting ghosted. And getting ghosted happens. Some of you may have already been in an interview process where you were ghosted, either before the interview happened or afterwards. The first thing we want to encourage you to do is wait the timeline they gave you, usually 1 to 2 weeks. Send a polite follow up email on whatever it was about or whatever happened. If somebody got your resume and said, all right, we're going to reach out to you in a certain amount of time. If you hadn't been reached out to by that time, send a polite follow up email that says, hey, I wanted to know where this sat. I sent my resume on such and such date and wanted to make sure that you got that and if there were any questions I could answer. If you don't get a response after that, it's okay to move on. And then again, don't take it personally. It's a broken system, not you. The system's broken, not you. And remember, Your control is in how you respond, not in what you can't control. All right. So you can only control what you can control, leave everything else to the people that it belongs to. And then finally, your complete interview system is put together. We have the before, research, prepare, plan, and handle logistics. During, open strong, structured answers, reading the room, asking the right questions, and ending strong just like you started strong. Then after, we have the thank you email, staying gracious, and being professional. And then learning, taking the self assessment and learning from your own mistakes and the questions that you got, questions you may not have been prepared for. And then you want to reframe any setbacks that showed up. And then you want to track your growth. So we're going to make sure that you get the playbook for this. Um, and in that playbook, we're going to give you some documents that are going to help you. But before we share those documents, remember, this isn't about perfection, it's about reliability.
Mhm.
Preparation removes the anxiety from uncertainty. Every interview is a learning opportunity, so learn from it. Professionalism matters in every outcome. And remember, you have agency or you have control in how you respond in every situation and circumstance. So, with your playbook, not only are you going to have access to the companion guide that goes with this session, but you're also going to get our interview journey checklist, which is a 4-phase walkthrough from getting the interview to the follow up. It's just a checklist that you can walk through to make sure you take each step that you need to take during the process. We're also going to give you a self assessment form where you can track, you can use it, you can make copies of it. After every interview, you can use it to track things about that interview to help you win and help you to see if there's any patterns, build some new answers, update any information that you need to. Of course, you'll get this full recording of this workshop. And I also mentioned the companion materials. And then we're going to share 2 guides with you. The first is going to give you an overall picture of the playbook and how an interview happens from start to finish and what you should do in it. And then the second one, we're going to remind you what to do when you bomb a question and give you a couple of examples of how to properly reframe questions so that you can practice doing it yourself. And if there's one thing that we don't say in this episode that we've said in others, is that the key for you to be good at this is to practice. Practice, practice, practice the behaviors that you want to exude in the interview, and you'll see them come forward. So we open the floor for any questions that you have. You can use the chat in the comment section or the comment section below if you're watching on YouTube or one of those platforms. And you can post here in our school distribution group, and we'll get answers back to you on any questions that you may have. So that's it. That's it of the Anxiety to Offer series. You have everything that you need to help you win in the interview process. What you have to do now is do the work of practicing and taking each section and make sure that you understand what's there and then you put it to work. If you missed any session, you can go to our YouTube channel, Foundations for Success, and click on playlist and watch this From Anxiety to Offer series there. There will be 5 videos there, and they're really going to help you win. You can also join our school group. You'll find the link on our website at foundations, the number 4, success.com. Lynn, Rosetta, any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
I would say my final thought is we've given you all the tools that we have found to be successful for us, things that we have tried and true. it's your responsibility to take those tools and use them to the best. And I look forward to seeing comments on here about the success that you have experienced because you've used this. And I'm so glad you've been a part of it.
I'd just like to say thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to share with you. Hope that it has been helpful. And like Lynn and David have said, we look forward to any questions you may have and help you to develop more and feel better about the interviewing process.
It's no doubt that if you use these tools, you're going to win. And that's why we created this. We're so grateful for you. Thank you for watching these videos and participating in this series. Again, drop a note, drop a comment, or send us a comment to info@foundationsforsuccess.com and tell us how this is helping you or what you've gotten out of these sessions. And that'll help us as we create future sessions. And speaking of future sessions, if there's something that you'd like to see us cover in the future, don't hesitate to share that. You can get more from us on our website. You can always visit our blog, or you can check out the Beyond Day One podcast. It's available every Wednesday on YouTube. Until then, I'm David, that's Lynn, and Rosetta. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye bye.